And so we reached the conclusion to our trilogy of redoing games. We covered updated re-releases, we covered remakes, and now we finally cover remasters. And we couldn't have chosen a better game to do it than the greatest Wii U game ever made, the wonderful 101. Okay, so as you might have guessed by this introductory sentence, I already played the original game on the Wii U, and the reason you're even watching this video so early is because I backed the remaster on Kickstarter. So yeah, with all of that baggage, you'll probably already know my opinion, but just in case you are short on time, allow me to spoil the rest of the video in 3, 2, 1. This game is fantastic. You could even say it's wink wink wonderful, and I'm going to spend the rest of this review gushing about it. That's it. The Wonderful 101 is one of the best games I've ever played, period. It isn't flawless, but it is still so fun that it is incredibly easy to forgive any small problems you might have with it. So, without further ado, let us commence the adoration. Except, hold up for a minute, because for consistency's sake, I shall now explain what I personally think a remaster means. A remaster is the same old game, but if the game was in SD, it is now in HD. The end. That's incredibly short, I know, but that's pretty much what a remaster is. If you mess too much with the game, it's an updated re-release, and if you change engines and redo the gameplay from scratch, it's a remake. So there isn't much room for a remaster to do extra things without ending up as an updated re-release. There can be extra things in it, of course, but those are usually concept art, maybe a speedrun mode, or minor alterations. Maybe even, and that's where I personally draw the line, they might add an easy mode or a speed up mode like the Mega Man collection or the Final Fantasy PC releases do. Of course, there are no hard and fast rules on art, and this is just my personal opinion, so you can always feel free to, let's say, if you want to believe that an updated re-release is the exact same as a remaster, you can do that. Just be ready to stomach the fact that by those rules, Persona 5 Royal and Catherine Full Body, which were released in almost the same generation with the same engine, are remasters and not updated re-releases. And one quick look at them will probably tell you by instinct that almost no content was actually remastered. And a better term might be that they were remixed, which is a cool term now that I think about it. But anyway, it's up to you to decide whether a remake, a remaster, an updated re-release, or if there even a distinction is. But I personally think there is, in that the Wonderful 101 is a remaster, and it's going to be our prime example of a remaster. So yeah, from that sentence, you probably already guessed, but the Wonderful 101 Remastered doesn't shake the formula of the original game too much. It does shake it a little bit by necessity, since the original game used the Wii U touchpad for a lot of its gimmicks, and Lord knows Kamiya loves his gimmicks, and I love the man for that. But yeah, the game does have quite a lot of gimmicks that use the touchpad. One of them that covers the whole game being the fact that in order to trigger gameplay techniques, gameplay abilities, you are supposed to draw shapes on the touchpad, on the Wii U touchpad. But that is a minor issue, since from day one you also had analog stick support, and you could use that to draw the shapes instead. A bigger issue arises from when the gimmicks required you to look away from the screen to the touchpad screen instead, and I'm sure you can personally think right now of a simple solution for the problem in no time, but that doesn't change the fact that those gimmicks must have created additional porting time due to the fact that, unlike the analog stick solution that was baked in the game from the start, they would have to be reprogrammed and possibly redesigned to fit into other platforms. And the solution Platinum found is workable, but hey, I'll put a pin on that for now, since I think I might be getting ahead of myself. Okay, so let's go back a little bit and start from this question. Who are Platinum Games, and who is Hideki Kamiya? Well, Platinum Games, formerly Clover Studios, are, for those who don't know, the most legendary action game developers of all time, making hit after hit with nary a bad game in sight, until they completely fucked up TMNT at least. So yeah, that means I count Korra as a good game. If you disagree, then 1v1 me, you meanie. Well, I can't believe that I actually acted as a huge fanboy for Supergiant before I did for Platinum, since I practically put Platinum on a Platinum shrine. I really do love them. But now, thanks to this video, things can go back to how they usually are normal for me. If any doubt remains about Platinum's pedigree, just pause the video and check out all the cool stuff they did. As for Hideki Kamiya, this game's director, he is the legendary blocker of Twitter, who at least as recently as 19th of June of 2019 had blocked by hand 70,398 people one by one on Twitter. He blocked all of them. What a fucking legend! Stopping all sorts of idiots from asking lazy questions while being an all-around great guy. He might have also directed some small indie titles like Devil May Cry and Resident Evil 2 and Okami, so you know, he's pretty underground, you might not have heard of him until now, so here is his full body of work for reference. But enough about that. Let's talk about the game. I'm sure you're here to listen about the game, so let's get right on topic. In the Wonderful 101, you take the role of the Wonderful 100. Talk about false advertising. A group of elite Super Sentai warriors who transform into their superheroic alter egos during times of crisis to help humanity. And it just so happens that it is a very good time to do so, now that an evil intergalactic empire called the Gaff Jerk has appeared to destroy humanity. So it's up to them and to you to control up to 100 heroes simultaneously and join them together to build giant hands, giant swords, giant guns, and all sorts of giant things in order to fight against their equally giant enemies and hopefully stop the destruction of Earth. In practice, this is translated in-game as you controlling an army of characters going from enemy encounter to enemy encounter using the appropriate transformations to defeat the absurd variety of enemies the game gleefully throws at you. In between those battles, there are all sorts of platforming challenges and hidden secrets in which you must use transformations for movement purposes rather than battling ones, and spice all of that up with absolutely batshit insane action sequences and you get the Wonderful 101, though that is really underselling how batshit crazy the game can really get. Without spoiling too much, the first section of the game alone has enough energy, destruction, and high stakes that if it didn't happen immediately after you begin the game, anyone could be forgiven for believing it is in fact the last section of the game. Capped off by a boss battle that is so long and involves so many mechanics, it really feels like the final boss, and yet things are only starting and the scale and excitement will only keep going up with hardly a reprieve for briefing until the very end. The very end being roughly 15 to up to 20 fucking hours away. Yes, it is one of those games. Normally, I would always advise for quality over quantity, since if your game is good but short, I will always gladly replay it and have more fun investing time into something I will wholeheartedly enjoy, but if it is padded, then chances are I will absolutely never want to play it again since I value my time too much for that. Wonderful 101 is one of the cases, however, that breaks those rules. Other companies have resource limitations, budget limitations, personal, time, budget, all limited. And of course, Platinum Games also have those, but they apparently don't give a shit, since this game delivers both a great experience with a large variety of enemies, environments, gimmicks, and so on, all of which require time and talent to design, program, model, and so on, and yet it goes for nearly 15 to 20 hours of game time, all using however many assets are necessary to do so, and it even nails it by not including a single bad section in the entirety of the game. The game is the stuff dreams are made of. A game that doesn't fall under the weight of its own potential and ambition so much as realize it so hard, I honestly can't think of a single thing I would improve on it. Wow. Okay, that's a lie, I can think of a thing or two, but most games I can think of a dozen. This one got really close to perfection. But enough of vague, big fancy words that symbolize abstract concepts. In order for you to understand what I mean in a practical level, it's best if we break down how a typical Wonderful 101 chapter works. Every chapter in the game is called an operation and they are divided in parts. Each part usually takes up from 30 minutes to 40 minutes, it can even be 50 minutes, and you can only save before the operation or between parts of an operation. Should you turn off your console during a part without saving, you lose all of your progress, so beware of that. You always start every part with a certain number of wonderful ones already in your party, and you can find them spread across each operation, but not to worry, since even if you don't find the actual superheroes to pad out your party, you can electroplate wonderful masks on the face of civilians you can easily find during operations, so you can boost your number up to controlling 100 fighters at the same time. Despite how odd that might sound at first, the control scheme works really well because you are actually only controlling the leader of the squad, while all of the other characters follow shortly behind you. Your characters are way too small to deal with most threats, so in order to fight back, you must draw a shape using the analog stick in order to get all of the characters to perform a Unite Morph, which is a special move wherein they're joined together to form a weapon based on the shape you drew. You can, for example, draw a circle to get them to turn into a giant fist, or a straight line to get them to turn into a giant sword. The bigger the shape you draw, the bigger and more powerful the end result, but that doesn't mean you should always draw them as big as possible, since the bigger you draw them, the slower they get to attack, when they don't turn into something completely different, like the Unite gun turning into a Unite bazooka if you draw it big enough. There are also other factors like the number of heroes that you currently have. It limits the size of the weapons you can summon, plus all of these moves draw from your Unite gauge, meaning you can just keep switching and overusing weapons without strategy, or else the gauge will be completely depleted and you will be unable to form weapons at all. Combine all of that with the fact that the more you use weapons, the more you rank up on them, unlocking new moves that allows for bigger combo chains, and you get one hell of a complex combat system. In true Platinum fashion, all of this is of course measured in terms of time spent, combo complexity, and damage received to properly grade you at the end of each individual battle, before ranking your skills as a whole at the end of each part of each operation. Operations aren't made solely out of battles though. Your typical operation usually begins with a short walk to set up the level before throwing you into your first battle, and the battles themselves are interconnected by segments of platforming and occasional puzzle solving, with every single operation introducing completely new enemies while throwing gimmicks and chains of quick-time events at you every so often. And yes, the gimmicks are worth mentioning, since the game rarely lets a single type of gameplay to occur for any extended length of time. You can go from a battle to a platforming segment, to a gimmick, to a quick time event, back to a battle, all within a time span of 20 minutes. You might think that might make things frustrating or too chaotic to get a grasp on, but that's when the game design shines its brightest, because all of this is connected through the Unite Morphs. Obviously, you must use the Unite Morphs in battle, but you also need to use them during platforming and puzzle solving, since more than weapons, they are actually tools as well, and you can use them to draw bridges, ladders, or even gliders to reach unexpected spots. Quick time events rarely, well, not exactly rarely, but most of the time they don't require you to just press one single button. They instead come in chains where you must draw a variety of shapes in sequence in order to perform truly spectacular series of events. The bigger you draw the necessary shape, the more points you get to spend later in the shops. And the gimmicks, if they don't require the Unite Morph to work, will almost assuredly require you to use it at some point, if not at various points during the gimmick before it is over. If one wanted to oversimplify the Wonderful 101, one could say it is a game about drawing shapes. And they wouldn't be wrong, nor would that be a bad thing, since drawing shapes is the connective tissue that brings together all of the game's elements, all of that mess that shouldn't work, into one cohesive whole, and manages to make it feel like every piece truly belongs. It makes it feel like an experience that is worth much more than the sum of its parts. But I digress, I'm getting too fancy again. So let's get right back to the operation breakdown. Between each part of the operation, you always end up finding a wonderful mart, which is essentially a convenience store where you can spend your well-earned currency to buy new moves, new combos, and even new equipment that can greatly aid you in battle. This serves as a good point to stop, relax, and plan your next move, but it also serves as a great reminder of the game's usual tone of humor, since you can always find a wonderful mark no matter where you go. Doesn't matter if you're in the street, or on the rooftops, or even in a secret base 1,000 miles under the sea, there's always a wonderful mart right around the next corner, and it's plainly hilarious to just imagine what kind of ridiculous situation in which the wonderful mart will pop out next. Before you even get a chance to see the first wonderful mart of each operation, however, you'll usually be introduced to a new main wonderful one, and that brings you a new weapon, and thus a new shape to memorize for your times of need. Immediately after that, or most of the time during said introduction to the new wonderful one, you'll be battling a new enemy type that might be too hard to bring down until the new ability is introduced and allows you to make short work of it, immediately making sure you understand the usefulness of your newfound power. Make no mistake, however, this isn't the kind of rock, paper, scissors combat system where you must pick your enemy's weaknesses to defeat them. It is in fact perfectly possible to defeat a wide variety of enemies with the weapons you already had, plus the introduction of new weapons often also introduce new ways to defeat previously found enemies even more efficiently. There are occasions, 99% of them related to having to remove spikes using the Unite Whip, but there are occasions where you simply must use a specific ability to weaken an enemy before delivering the actual strikes, but most of the time you are going to be surprised by how many enemies behave in all sorts of different ways when impacted by all sorts of different weapons. But alas, that alone could be the subject of an hours-long video by itself. So unfortunately, we don't have the time right now, so allow me to just remind you that the combat in this game is insanely deep, and let us move on. Each operation is capped off by a truly magnificent boss battle that takes up the entire last part of the operation. That's right, every chapter in this game is essentially capped off by a 30 to 40 minute multi-phase, multi-layered, fully multi-gimmicked it up boss battle, and it is amazing. There is unfortunately not much I can say in this segment about the boss battles, unless I did a very specific breakdown of each individual battle because of how different and awesome they are. So just look at the pretty footage on the screen and feel the awesome power emanating from the screen. Another awesome thing you can look forward to experiencing, especially during boss battles, is the game's amazing soundtrack, which got 2 of its tracks remade with actual orchestras for this remastered release. If there is one way to describe the soundtrack, it would be heroic. The soundtrack is almost always upbeat, always rooting for you and blasting encouraging melodies during your most awesome moments. During your most tense and dangerous events, rather than take a complete downturn, they choose instead to use what my dumbass could only describe as a slick, spy flick, sci-fi flick appeal to them, with a thrill effect, so to speak. So it always feels like the soundtrack is constantly pushing you forward, no matter how bad things get. Of course, there are the quiet, melancholic, introspective ones for the more sad moments that really get you to stop and consider what is going on, but most of the time, the soundtrack is trying to constantly push you forward to your next battle, no matter how bad things get, which really works given the context of this game and the world and the rules the game operates in. The remaster is going to hit all sorts of different consoles and devices, but I personally played it on PC, and as a port on PC, it has its own share of virtues and issues. The game is really optimized, using only 1/4 of my not so powerful graphics card VRAM, even when running at max settings, and the loading times are less than 5 seconds on a normal hard drive. No, not on an SSD. It actually takes less than 5 seconds to load the levels on a normal hard drive. Damn if that is not some really good optimization. On the other hand, sometimes textures can look a bit iffy, and I believe they didn't load properly, and that this was unintended, but that's really a minor issue compared to how often the game crashes, or rather, it's not that it crashes often, it's how many opportunities the game has to crash. I know that sounds weird, but listen to me. It didn't crash very often at all. However, the game can crash whenever you leave the shop screen, whenever you press the continue button after getting a game over, and even at the end of any loading screens, it can crash. And I'm sure Platinum, the staff at Platinum are working hard to patch it, but it sucks that it doesn't just crash when you do something specific once or twice that can be avoided. Instead, basically every screen transition can crash you. That is very odd and very bad for us, as from the placement of a user. You don't want to lose your progress at every screen transition. And what is even weirder is that when it happened to me, usually when it happened to me and I restarted the game, the game skipped the title screen and I get thrown right back into the operation menu with the mouse and keyboard prompts, even though I was using a controller, and I couldn't revert it until I finished the level and restarted the game. I don't know if finishing the level is a requisite to do that, but I just ended up finishing it and restarting for it to go back to normal. I have no idea what is happening. It is very odd when that happened, but I'm sure they will patch it, because Platinum has yet to abandon one of their games with such a game-halting bug. And then there's Platinum's solution for the multi-screen gimmicks. I will keep it short and simple since they did the same. They just threw the second screen as a smaller screen on top of your main screen. Not the most elegant of solutions, but a very Platinum one if I ever saw it. Also, in case you wanna see the second screen at any time, what it usually showed on the Wii U gamepad, you can press select at any time for the smaller screen to show up on top of your main screen, regardless of if you're playing during a multi-screen gimmick or not. I personally don't mind it, and well, I suppose it is a way to keep the game as intact as possible instead of trying to rework out the gimmicks for the remastered edition, which would have ended up making it more of a remake at that point, basically. If there is, however, one aspect of the game that I can definitely think up some negative criticism about, it would be the story, which was usually agreed upon to be the weakest link of the game, even back on its original release in 2013. But even that, I think, got a lot more negative critique than it deserves. The story itself is nothing special. A bunch of aliens decide to invade Earth for the third time, thus sparking a third intergalactic war, and it's up to a team of superheroes to defend it by going after a series of sparkling MacGuffins that are spread all across the world in order to buy enough time so they can fire a super giga laser that will destroy all the aliens and save the day. It's all very cliche, but honestly, it is not what happens that matters in this case, it is how it happens, and more importantly, to who it happens. In that sense, Platinum delivered their dialogue A-game to this game by having one of the largest Platinum original main casts, while having all of the characters display colorful personalities and unique dynamics between team members. It is all very silly and larger than life, yes, but this is a very silly and larger than life game that doesn't take itself seriously at all, so the tone fits perfectly. With one major exception, it was hard not to fall in love with all of the characters, with their flaws and everything, by the end of the game. But even so, what I think doesn't get enough credit in this game, and maybe in other games, is the silent writing of it. That's just a silly term I made up. Don't bother googling it, you won't find it anywhere, and maybe there's a better word to describe it, but what I mean by silent writing is just that. Something that had to be written to tie the plot together, but which doesn't have any dialogue or any events that are associated with traditional writing. Jumping from falling towers, countering lasers, and all sorts of other set pieces didn't just come out of a vacuum, like they were the next obvious step of where to go. They needed to be written down. They needed to be planned and then designed to fit into gameplay. So they too, much like the cinematography and editing of a movie, they tell a story of their own without any traditional writing, silently but effectively, in order to deliver the craziest action sequences to ever be put into a video game. And it's not only the level design that delivers its own style of writing, there's plenty of humorous gags that define and enhance the silliness of the world without a single word. Characters move mid-freeze frame in amusing ways, enemies try to menacingly drop from their alien spaceship only for it to turn out that the exit is too small for them. Giant robots drop from the sky while equipping themselves with a giant laser beam firing dropship that are about to destroy the protagonist, only for them to slip and fall from the boss arena before they try to self-destruct while holding the protagonist's ship, and they are finally defeated by tickling. And all of this is delivered without a single line of dialogue. This, my friends, is what people mean when they say a game has a strong sense of personality. And this is why The Wonderful 101 might actually have some of the best writing ever put to game. Also, not to spoil anything, but the plot does have quite a few crazy twists as it reaches its end, all of which got proper foreshadowing, so you know. It's not like the main plot is bad either, it just takes a while to get going. So in conclusion, The Wonderful 101 is one of the best, if not the best, action-adventure, hack-and-slash, whatever you wanna call it, game ever created. It is no exaggeration when I say this is one of my favorite games ever made. But unfortunately, being released only on the Wii U, a console which had one of the poorest receptions I have ever seen, plus the fact that Platinum is relatively unknown outside of the hardcore gamer sphere, with their titles never selling gangbusters unless they already had a powerful brand attached to it, made it so that a lot of people missed out on this experience. Well, that is no more. The game is now released on every current platform that is relevant, plus being immortalized into the eternal game preservation behemoth that is the PC, meaning you have no more barriers or excuses to not buy one of the truly most wonderful games ever released. Seriously though, you won't get disappointed. Buy this game. I believe in you. If you have any interest, buy it. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Penguin's Promise. Seriously, it feels so good to finally reach the end of a review with no reservations about what you're recommending. It is just that good. So yeah, go out there, and when it's released, if you didn't back it when it's released, give it a try. Maybe buy it on sale later if you really need to, but every single dollar you spend on this game is worth it. It is a really, really good game. Yeah, that's probably the most overwhelming recommendation I ever gave in this channel, I think. But yeah, it's that good. Go buy it. Buy the game. Okay? Okay. So thanks for listening to the very end of the video, and some people forget it, so remember to like if you like, dislike if you dislike, leave a comment if you feel like it, or if you have any corrections. I'm always open to corrections. I'm not 100% guy. If I missed anything you thought was important to add, please do comment about it, and I'll see you guys whenever I see you guys. Unstoppable.